All right.
Morning, folks.
Hello.
Folks, a few minutes to join. Throw your names in meeting notes. Feel free, otherwise I can sweep them up. Also, if there's anything you'd like to talk about, feel free to throw that in too, and we'll make sure we do our best to get to it. Morning, Jay.
On.
Give it like one more minute. Might be a light week. Morning, David.
Hello there. I hope things are going well.
They are. How about with you?
Doing well, and a good afternoon for me.
Excellent. Excellent. I've taken your advice where I stop worrying about what time zone it is for everybody, and I say how it is for me. And
It's
if
freeing,
folks have
isn't it?
gotten offended by that, they haven't told me. So we're gonna keep doing that.
Yeah, I have told you the story about the telephone, haven't I?
No.
When the telephone was first created, one of the first social problems was how to greet people, because the standard at the time was you greeted someone depending on their social station relative to you.
Oh,
And that doesn't
neat.
work when you answer the phone.
Neat. That's funny.
So
So what you're saying is the actual telephone was created like 30 years prior to it being used, because it took 30 years for them to figure this out.
I don't think it took them that long, but I mean, it was a social challenge, and Bell lost. I think it was Edison who wanted hello or hi, and Edison wanted a hoy hoy, and we don't do hoy hoy. So,
Oh, that's awesome. All right. Well,
there's even a better old chestnut about how
Oh.
AT&T gave away the intellectual property behind cellular technology. Because
Nice.
it's literally true that back in the early mid 80s, when AT&T and IBM were both being considered to be broken up because they were big bad monopolies, IBM got a pass because Unix started to change the landscape, but AT&T had a natural monopoly. And to make a long story short, after fighting it for several years, AT&T finally capitulated and said, okay, we want to be a long distance company because that's where the money is. We still want to make big pieces of hardware, old switching infrastructure, Western Electric, Lucent, And we still want to do research in the labs, but you can take the last mile, the baby bells, because we don't, that's a low margin business that we really would rather, wash our hands of. And during the press conference, when they were announcing all of that with the government, some smart reporter in the back of the room said, "What about that wireless technology that they've been trialing in Chicago?" And up until that point, the most prolific wireless technology was called SMR, Specialized Mobile Radio. The press to talk, "Hey, Charlie, bring some more parts to the job site, over," which is more analogous to having a large AM antenna broadcasting a large area. But they've actually been in trials with early first generation cellular in Chicago. But AT&T and even their expensive consultants told them that, oh, by the year 2000, there might be 1 million people using this newer stuff. So when the reporter asked about it, the government didn't know what they were talking about. The executive from AT&T and the government turned away from the podium for a second. "What's this about?" "Well, it's this." And, "Well, is it more like local or long distance?" And the executive answered honestly, "Well, it's more like, local, a local call." "Well, that'll go over to the bells." "Okay, fine." And that's how they literally turned back to the podium and announced that AT&T had gave away the intellectual property and rights to what became AMPS, the Advanced Mobile Phone System, and had to buy it back some 12, 15 years later for billions of dollars.
Awesome.
So be careful.
Right.
Small decisions can have large ramifications.
It's true.
Yes, but you still have to make decisions is the problem.
Certainly true.
Yeah.
All right.
Awesome. So welcome everybody to the October 26th Identifying Security Threats Working Group meeting. I will be your host. Is there anybody new who has not been here before? I don't think so. Yeah. If anybody would like to say anything or reintroduce yourself or anything like that, you're welcome to. Cool. So we have some upcoming events. So our inaugural office hours is going to be happening on October 28th. This is this Friday in 2 days. So you are welcome to join and participate. Look at the OpenSSF Slack channel for office hours for details. And I haven't seen an invite for it, so I will. I'll ping the channel and see how the OpenSSF folks joined, because I think for the projects that would attend, they needed to fill out and register. So we'll also see if anybody registered. So it may take a couple iterations of this to get it off the ground, but I'm glad to see how it's moving. Second, we are
before.
What?
It's never been done before.
There you go. Second thing, we are tentatively planning to release the Alpha Mega annual report on this coming Tuesday. We have a blog that is almost done. We're just waiting for some final things. It is possible that will be delayed. We're not going to push it out until those important things get done. So, but best case, it'll be this coming Tuesday. The security review video walkthrough. This is another channel. I think it's called Security Review Video Walkthrough, I think. Will be happening on November 7th. So this is next Monday, or like a week and a Monday from now. Everybody's welcome to join. We will be taking we'll take an open source project, and we will interactively and live do a security review of it. So we'll run tools and triage and kind of do everything we can in an hour. We're going to choose a pretty small package to do this. It will not be published until we're confident that we haven't found any interesting 0 days, because we want to get those fixed before we publish. But in all likelihood, it'll be we'll publish it, and it'll be also something that we'll iterate on. So if you're interested in participating, please ping the channel or just join on November 7th. It's on the OpenSSF public calendar. Let's join. The LF Member Summit, I believe that is November 11 to 15, or I might have the dates wrong. But it's coming up soon.
11th is a Friday. That's the last day of the conference.
Okay, so it's like 7, 9, 10, 11?
Yeah.
Or,
Monday is rival day. Tuesday, keynotes and sessions, and then more sessions on Wednesday and Thursday.
the week of November 7th. Cool, thank you. And then finally, the virtual summit of maintainers of critical open source software, which I think we need a short name for it. It looks like that is going to be, I believe we said January for that. We talked about that last.
The date has not been finalized yet. I mean, we were supposed to finalize it yesterday, but people are in KubeCon and other events, so we didn't have the meeting yesterday. But I mean, there's no reason for it to be not being mid-January. We just haven't finalized the date yet.
We'll do still finalizing date, probably mid-January. Awesome. So I want to go into project updates for folks that we have who can talk to these things. Security reviews, I would wait for Amir. I need to connect with him offline for a couple of things, so I'll try to get an update from him. I haven't seen, this seems to be just kind of steady new reviews dribbling in here and there. For Alpha Omega, we're talking to the TAC. Talking to TAC on November 1st. We'll give them kind of the full update, including the stuff that's in the annual report. But we're looking at, I don't know if I should announce this. Yeah, sure, why not? So we have our first hire, although I'm not going to say their name because reasons.
Don't yet.
Okay, so we were able, so we have our first software engineer hire. I'm super excited to have this person starting hopefully in the middle of November, working on Omega and the tooling and orchestration and whatnot that we're going to need to find lots of vulnerabilities. As part of that, and this is, I would love to get input on this. I posted a note in the Alpha Omega Slack channel, and I think on a GitHub issue in Alpha Omega. Basically, I would like to be able to publish assertions that security validation work has been completed against an open source project in a way that is consumable via a policy-driven, what am a Bob thing, and have that be as streamlined and automated as possible. So the same way that, so we did an experiment about 6 months ago, I think most of you are aware, but we ran a bunch of tools against a piece of open source. When they came back clean, meaning no code QL findings, no semgrep findings, it was reproducible and no public vulnerabilities. I think there was maybe one more check, but a finite number of checks. When they all came back totally clean, then we asserted that through a security review that, text that a template that we stuck out and published. And that's great for reading it, but it's not awesome for consuming it. So what we were thinking is doing something, in fact, I should just show you what we're thinking. So imagine a world where we run lots of tools against a piece of open source, and for each hand waving on like the lower level design of this, but let's say for each tool, if it spit out, it can have some sort of output. It can either like find one or more issues, not find any issues, maybe fail to run or something. Provide enough information out to a consumer so that they can say, was left pad 1.3, like, what do we know about it? Well, we'll know that it was scanned by 7 different tools and that no critical findings were discovered. Or it was scanned and 3 critical findings popped out, but after triage, they were all false positive. So the net was 0. And lots of other, it was reproducible. I mean, in theory, like, it had these scorecard values at this point in time, and anything else like that. And you push this into what I was probably going to be an in toto assertion, or an in toto attestation. I'm using assertion and attestation. I get the 2 words confused, but a statement of that fact, and then it's signed and all that stuff, and then you as a consumer can just say, look in my my lock file, my list of open source I use, the metric dashboard for left pad, and you can see this stuff, and you can say, apply my policy, and my policy says I can only use projects that have had 2 or more static analysis tools run against it in the past year and have had 0 critical findings pop out of that, or whatever you want to express as part of your policy language. I think that's like the elevator pitch here. I have lots of open questions on like how this would actually work, but I want to open this up for thoughts and whatnot. And please, in addition, obviously we can talk now, but if we can throw comments here so it's more public. Over there, that would be awesome too. Any thoughts?
So I'm wondering, like, who's gonna be producing these things? Is it going to be like produced by like Alpha Omega, like the Omega side doing the scans and producing these attestations that, or is this going to be like run by the maintainers and they will have somehow or some process of like automatically generating these things?
So I think it needs to be run by it shouldn't be Omega only. I don't think it should be maintainers themselves. It needs to be a trusted third party. So the trusted third party is asserting to you, the consumer, that this artifact that let's just say anonymous maintainer created is trustworthy, or the level of trustworthiness of that thing. So you can't attest it yourself because you're biased. And while, yes, I would imagine Omega would produce lots of these, you as a consumer of this would be able to say, I don't trust anything these Omega people are doing. I'm only going to trust things that some other third party provides. So I would want this attestation assertion database to be publicly, like, I guess anybody can push to it, and then it's on the consumption that you filter out the trusted routes that you'd want to respect and value. That's kind of what I'm thinking.
So the other side of the question is like, who's consuming it as well? As in, if it is only Omega producing it, then it doesn't have that value, but how do we get the like other community also starting to produce the same artifact so that it has some value, collective value? So is it going to be like used by, let's say, scorecards or some way as something that has been, okay, so there's this project has some attestations associated with that and so on. And then others can come up with their own.
Yeah. I definitely think it has a place to be shown in some way within definitely and Jay and Christine, I love your or everybody look feedback on where this could fit in the metric dashboard. I think scorecard could I mean it feels like it fits, so that would be interesting. Building it into the underlying like npm install -- policy equals strict, like that might make sense, or just a separate tool. So you do, npm validate my thing, policy equals strict. That would, I think coming up with a giant, building this database of assertions, I think is going to be relatively easy. Building the policy evaluator is also pretty easy. I think you're right, which we touched on, which is like the actual consumption of this, showing that this has value, like what value, like what would an end consumer actually do with this information? So I'm a developer. I want to use foo. So I do policy check my thing of foo, and it says two tools have been run against it. It's not reproducible. There's one potentially moderate level security issue, but it hasn't been triaged. But what do you as a consumer do with that information? And what decisions would you make? And
just oops, Arno's hands up first.
It's okay if you want to react to that. Go ahead. I have something else.
Oh, okay. I could tell you what would be next, and given that, but but nothing that was told to me ahead of time, would say, well, how long have they had how much time have they had to triage? If they just got that report yesterday, goodness gracious, there are very few organizations that can guarantee 24-hour analysis. But if it's been sitting in their queue for 9 months, I would worry a lot. It's not reproducible, not good, not unusual. On the other hand, and this is something I mentioned to the dashboard folks, if it used to be reproducible and now it's not, or it's not only is it not reproducible, but it says it's version 101 and the latest version in the source code repo is 100. That looks more like somebody broke into the package repo.
yeah.
So in all of this, you're trying to get an estimate of how much risk am I taking on, and things that suggest especially unusual amounts of risk, I think is what you're looking for primarily. We've had a discussion, for example, about single person projects. I do think that single person projects by definition are riskier. Are they unusual? No, they're incredibly common case. So saying I'll never use a single person project isn't really reasonable. And it's not clear how by itself, you're not getting a lot of risk. It is a risk indicator. It's not by itself a high risk, but it's a high risk if it's combined with other indicators like, no triage for a year, or no releases in 3 and it's 100,000 lines of code.
So yeah, I had a question when it comes to the triage, the filtering you're talking about. Anybody can write. So do we really know how to filter, knowing that, who runs the tools, what tools exactly it was? Is that the genuine, alpha omega tool, or is that some kind of, fork that somebody
Well,
played with?
so I imagine the schema that the schema would need to be expressive enough to convey what was actually done. So on one hand, you could just say, I ran a tool. On the other hand, you could say, here's like the command line and the environment, and here's the link to its actual output, or it's a containerized thing that should reproduce the same results, or, you could go anywhere on that spectrum. But I think at the end of the day, though, the actual assertion is the private key of the entity that's making the assertion, that is putting their reputation saying that this thing is authentic. And I don't think there's a way to get around that. I mean, I suppose you could have a thing where you only trust assertions if you have identical content from two or more parties. You could do like multi-party, assertions. But I think it would still be up to you, the consumer, or proxy for you, who's making like kind of judgment calls here, to say that these three entities are top level trustworthy to make assertions, and by default the tooling like only cares about what they say. Or you could make up your own route and do a thing. But I think it should be a relatively open system that multiple parties can contribute to, multiple parties can consume from. That
Right.
just
No,
feels
that
like
makes sense.
Yeah.
I think that makes sense. I agree. It has to be rich enough in content so the context in which it was run, which version of the tool exactly was used, and so on, right?
Yep.
And then it's the consumers have the responsibility to decide who they want to trust, as always.
Yep.
All right.
Cool. Any other thoughts there before we move on? Cool. If you do have more thoughts, please throw them in the issues. I think that this, I mean, I'm hoping to be able to make progress here in the next like 2 to 3 months, to have something that we can kind of show and argue about in concrete terms. Let's see. So assimilation, I don't have any new information on this. It's just bandwidth on my side. I still think that it's a reasonable idea. I should take this to, I think I promised TAC that I would take it to them in the next 2 months or so. Assimilation was the open source security ecosystem SIM, where we monitor new published events and look at various indicators of risk around the metadata, not the content, but like, this is installing cryptocurrency or mining cryptocurrency when it's installed, or dumping environment variables over to pastebin, or whatever, things like that. So more to come there. If you're interested in participating in this, we can move it forward at the rate of participation, basically. Security insights, I don't see Luigi, so we'll hold off on that. I already talked about the security walkthrough, and metrics dashboard. We have a bunch of time to talk about this, so is there anything new that you folks would like to talk about with metrics dashboard? And this is the metrics dashboard SIG stuff.
Yeah, I think it's key to note that, I mean, there's a whole different SIG focused on this. So if you're interested in that, go to its meetings. But for this group, the quick summary is we've talked together. There's some various things. I think one of the next steps is basically identifying potential metrics, users. We already at least made our first cut identifying users, what they need. And and then after that, I think the goal is to have some sort of very simple, rough idea of what it would look like. And, based on the metrics to openssf.org, LFX security, scorecards, best practices badge, many chaos, many other sources of things have done this kind of thing.
Cool. And
just to add on, I mean, so we also discussed, and this is right along with what David was just talking about, the type of metrics, and whether or not I have my notes up in front of me just now. Now they're not there anymore. The type of metrics and whether or not we're focusing on projects, products, or processes, products, projects, and processes. Also, perhaps collaborating with other working groups as well. So understanding, taken from critical projects working group and IDing projects that have the largest impact, and perhaps focusing metrics on these in the beginning, right? And then so we talked about that as well. We also discussed a few housekeeping items. Talking about guac as well, about getting data and all that kind of stuff. A few other things here. We handled some issues around meeting times. There was some meeting time confusion. So right along with what David said, get involved in the meeting time should all be accurate now. So we shouldn't have those kind of issues there. See,
I probably ought to check to find the next meeting.
I think the next meeting is the 28th. So on Friday. Friday would be the next meeting. So look for that on the calendar. That should be updated properly.
I don't see it.
You don't see it, okay. Hold on, let me check here. Make sure.
I think it's on the 4th.
I'm sorry?
I think it's on the 4th of.
It's on the 4th? It's on the 4th.
Got it.
Yeah, okay.
It's on the 4th. Okay,
Oh, yeah.
okay, yeah.
I
So
see
we
it.
had it written as the 28th in the notes. That might have been something that we did early on. Yeah, it is on the 4th.
Yeah, November 4, and I have it as noon Eastern time.
Yeah, noon Eastern. Yep.
All right.
So
So let's
I have two different meetings at the same time for the same topic. So I have stream 2 risk. I'm sorry, go ahead.
That was the confusion that I mentioned, that it's actually showing up 2 different times.
I only have the one meeting. I have the stream 2.
okay.
Risk
I also have an OpenSSF SIG risk meeting. That was, I believe, what happened is that's created when you signed up with the LFX registration.
Yes. So you get 2
It's
meetings.
the same meeting at the same time. It's the same meeting.
Same meeting, same time for November 4th. But what happens is that on November 18th, it's the same meeting 2 different times. I think it's because of the time zone change.
2 different times? What date is this?
So on the
So
18th?
So you know how it repeats every 2 weeks? So if you look at your meeting invite on the 18th, you will see that the one that you got through a registry or an individual link is going to show up at, say, like 11 Eastern, and then the other one is going to show up as 12 Eastern, the public one.
I see. You're right.
I might have an outdated OpenSSF calendar. I only see the one meeting on the OpenSSF calendar.
Yeah, well, you are correct. There's only one on the OpenSSF calendar. What happened is the LFX folks created a separate meeting invite, and if you accepted their invitation, you got a separate entry.
So you know what it
And-
is? This might be an issue with the personal links, with the personal
Yeah.
Zoom meetings.
Exactly. So the
Okay.
personal Zoom meetings are not respecting time zone changes.
Ah,
Okay, so which one should everyone delete?
so the meeting should happen at the 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. That meeting should happen. The other one, the 8 a.m. or 11 a.m. on the 18th, that one isn't it? And I think that
Okay.
so that speaks to what Christine was saying. The LFX platform might not, the calendar might not have been adjusted to meet daylight savings time.
Right.
Exactly.
And I suspect the challenge is if you say like East Coast meet time, that's one time, but if you set it as a UTC time, then
Yeah,
it will not, then it will
it will
bounce
not
around.
change.
Right,
Right, it will not
exactly.
change. Yep,
So my guess is that this was set, that other one was set
with the UTC time.
to a UTC time, which would be correct if that's what you wanted, but is that what you wanted?
Okay.
So,
And I'm
all
not
right,
sure.
so- All right,
I'm
so
not sure if
do we
I'm an
want-
admin to fix that yet on the LFX platform.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so let's just do this. So how about this? I'll ask you to do this, Jay.
I'll work it out. I'll fix it. I'll work it
Okay.
out. I'll fix it.
Okay,
Um,
well, okay. If Jay, if you will, if you have trouble, you let me know, and I will go. I will go scream or try to fix it.
Absolutely.
could you also,
But that's all I got in a nutshell for the SIG and that's what we talked about a lot of stuff, but that stuff is in a nutshell what we discussed going into the next meeting.
Yeah, I would add one more thing. I mean, there's a number of topics discussed, but I think one of the other challenges was exactly what are you evaluating?
Right.
And there were multiple possible answers to that. You could evaluate a project. You could evaluate a project as represented by a specific repo.
Yeah.
You could evaluate a package, or you could evaluate a specific version of a package. And and basically you can kind of see the links flowing the other way. If you're looking at a version of a package, you're also end up evaluating a package in general, and we hopefully links to a source code repo where that package was generated from, and then there's questions you can answer there. It's not clear to me what the MVP needs to be, but I think it needs to at least cover packages and project repos, but that's to be determined.
Mhm. Yeah, I think most of the interesting metrics will be not version specific for that. Like until we bring in assertions and scan results and like things that only operate on a physical like.
Well, no, there's actually a really important piece of data that matters, and that is the number of known vulnerabilities.
Yes.
I mean, there
Yeah,
are
that's a good
organizations
point.
where that is, the US is actually proposing laws and regulations specifically focusing on, tell me about the known vulnerabilities.
Yep.
And if that is your primary focus, then you need to know the version number.
Didn't they include like silly language like known and unknown vulnerabilities or? I thought there was something somewhere where I was like, wait, what?
Yeah, that would be interesting to enforce. I just got recently some my apologies for inside baseball, but some proposed legislation for the U.S. Department of Defense, and they want them to look and be aware, and they want to only accept components, software with components with no known vulnerabilities that are exploitable. Now, it's the are exploitable part that's critical, because obviously in a vast number of cases, just because there's a known vulnerability, that doesn't mean it's exploitable in its larger context. But it's also one heck of a challenge to prove something isn't exploitable.
Well, which is why I think the goal of that is just address all the vulnerabilities, regardless of if it's exploitable, because otherwise,
I actually, strange as it may seem, I actually applaud the goal. I think that is a reasonable long-term destination. I think that trying to expect that, hey, we're just going to push, we're slam on the brakes and not accept the software we've been accepting for 40, 50 years, and we're going to suddenly change everything.
Yeah.
It's the speed of change that I think is unreasonable, not the destination.
Yep.
It is going to be challenging if you truly say nothing exploitable, because even if, you know, I released it today and an hour or something else found out. I mean, that's not, I can't say that.
It sounds like they could use like an assertion consumption evaluator.
I think everybody, well, in fact, that's what Vex is all about, being able to assert that this component is not actually a vulnerability in this larger context. And being able to automatically...
but as far as this assurance activity, these assurance activities have taken place against this thing, and therefore you should feel good about it. And which kind of goes back to that angle where it's not even. I think the biggest benefit is that you take something from an what is an unknown, I guess, to a known. Sorry, but like a package that you have no information on.
Right.
Knowing that it has a vulnerability is actionable because you can decide like I'm not going to use it or what. Right. Knowing that it's been evaluated and has some data to suggest that it is safe, while not actionable, meaning like you wouldn't do anything with this, you should sleep better knowing that all of that, you know, of all of your entire supply chain, 80% of it you should worry very little about, and this 20% you should worry more on, as opposed to having to distribute your worry across all of them.
Right. So. Right, and indeed, I would argue that if you have taken the effort to update the known vulnerable components to components that no longer have known vulnerabilities, at least ones that aren't exploitable, you have reduced your overall risk.
Certainly. Yep. Cool. Is there anything else anyone would like to talk about?
So, Michael, I would like to talk about, so we've been working on this like a separate project with you on the PyPy repository scanning. And basically, like, we did some experiments, we submitted some results, we were trying to figure out what are the ideal ways of basically communicating the results to the maintainers and have them fixed. I mean, not necessarily vulnerability, but at least at the security hardening, just for that. So at some point, like, I would like to like get some guidance on like what we should do next, or how can we move this forward. I mean, this is somewhat tangentially related to the automated security review that as in like this could be part of like automated, even like attestation, etc. Those could be generated, and that's why. I mean, it's tangentially related, but at some point, maybe I don't know whether it's the time, but at some point we need to discuss about like how we can move that particular project.
I mean, right now we have time.
Yes.
So just to clarify the particulars of the question, this is so for everybody else. The scenario is you want to report you have a magic black box that generates what you believe to be high quality vulnerabilities, but a lot of them. So you want to automate to the extent possible, or minimally person time in getting these out to authors. And what we've all learned is that the perception of this kind of drive-by bot-driven, hey, a tool found a thing, so you should definitely like stop everything and fix it. Maintainers often react viscerally to that, and is there a better workflow
in the small experiment that we did? We submitted 25 automated, actually manually created, but they appeared to be automated, but they were all manually created. But there were only 2 projects which had negative reactions, and one of them was because of a mistake that like our guy who was doing the stuff that was doing it. It was like he was not following the right protocol, so it was not that. But what we also understood, and part of that fact is, so out of the 25 that we submitted, I think 12 got even like merged within like 2 or 3 days. So that's a high amount of bugs that were immediately accepted and so on. I have the actual data that I've shared before. And so there's some value to that. In the end, we would like it to have as something like you can call it an attestation, you can call it a quality gate, but like that. And so that's what I was asking about, like who's going to be consuming these attestations. I mean, down the line, in distant future, maybe we can have, like, let's say for any project or any library to be in PyPI, it has to pass through attestation by somebody, or it's just not featured there. I mean, so we create a gate and that way we collectively upgrade the process, and then this could be a part of that vision. So what we would like to do now, but at the same time, like about this drive-by fixing or suggestion thing, there's also politics that is involved, which is like, if let's say our company Open Refactory suddenly comes up and does that, it might sound like a PR campaign, which people perceived it like the one or two cases where it was perceived as a PR campaign, which it wasn't. But if it is coming from, let's say, an OpenSSF or PyPI or some other authority, then it's that collaboration or that stamp of approval that's also important, because then people trust it more. And it's just like how human nature is, reacting to tools. So these are the places where we need to discuss and figure out like how we can move this thing ahead. At its minimum, what we really need is to scale this. Right now, we are scanning like 200 projects. We want to scale it to, like, as the goal of Omega is to do it 10,000 and beyond. Like, why not 430,000 of IPI? So that's kind of like and in order to do an experiment of that scale or extent, that would need some support on infra or something. To scale this. So regarding those, we need to figure out a model of how we can collaborate and move this to the next stage.
I'd love to get others' thoughts on this. What do you guys think? Should OpenSSF writ large be in a position where we are, so obviously we would do this for Alpha Omega.
Yes.
Is there a role for OpenSSF outside of Alpha Omega for engaging directly with maintainers, reporting vulnerabilities at scale? I guess does that question even matter? Because it's definitely the Alpha Omega camp.
And the infra that we build, it can as well apply to Alpha Omega. It doesn't matter. Yeah. So the big vision is to actually basically build a dashboard of some sort where in the background we run the Alpha Omega toolchain. We also run ICR. We run some other tool that also comes in. All the results are consumable together. All of them come to a dashboard to a maintainer. Because the result is highly concentrated at that point, it's feasible for that person to actually triage. And then from that, we generate the pull request, then the software maintainers come in and fix that. And collaboratively, we do rinse and repeat on that project after project and so on. So it's not related to really us. The big picture that I actually see is to, to run both the Docker image for the 22 something tools that the Omega has, as well as our tool, as well as some other in future, but create this framework where these are reported back to the maintainers, and then they fix it, and we have a process of tracking that as well.
Yep. So I thought I had screenshots in here, but maybe not. So it'd be really hard for me to say that Omega shouldn't, that Omega shouldn't play a role here. We did start out building a dashboard for Omega to glob together all these results so you could triage it efficiently and all that stuff. And so that project exists, and it's maybe for 50% done, maybe. It's probably maybe another 2 months of work to get it in good shape. But we've also said that we trust ourselves less to run an operational service that collects and stores and manages 0 days at scale than we do on just buying some high-end workstations that having folks will work locally. We can still run the website locally so that they have a nice experience, but like, so that was kind of our thinking on why we took our foot off the gas for that triage portal. But there was a doc that we wrote on basically saying whenever we described it as a commercial entity comes to us and says, hey, we want to work with you, Alpha Omega. Like you have a really super sharp tool. We want to use it. The way that we did this for CodeQL and for SNCC is we just have them integrated into the Docker container. So we run them locally. You know, they are, you know, for SNCC, we have an API key that they gave us, so we can run that. If you don't have the API key, it's not going to run, things like that. For services that we would not be able to run ourselves, so things that are, you know, and just generically, you know, a vendor run thing, to be able to consume results at scale. So there was a security researcher in Europe somewhere. I'm drawing a blank on his name. But he developed another static analysis tool for Python, and he ran it across everything. And he had this like 40 gigabyte JSON, you know, output, you know, that he shared. And because of that scale, like, what's he going to do with that? Like, he can't, you know, go through that. So what I would like to have Omega develop muscle for is consuming results at scale and operationalizing the triage and everything else. We met with GitHub Security Lab last week. I think it was last week. Talking about their approach, and you know, they do both vertical, so they'll look at, for a particular project, look for all the vulnerabilities and triage them all, and then report out. But they found just better success in going horizontal, where they look for just vulnerability class X across, you know, hundreds or thousands of projects, and then try to, you know, because I think the presumption was that the analyst is more focused when looking at one particular type of issue across lots of projects than every issue across one. Either way, though, I think it all makes sense. Like, I don't see any reason why Omega should not consume, like, from Open Refactory and do that last mile triage and reporting. Because at the end of the day, if the vulnerability gets fixed, like, everybody in the chain gets a point. So, you know, we like don't need to generate the vulnerability ourselves from our own rules. Like, you know, we don't care. So I feel like that makes sense.
And fundamentally, we don't have any problem even connecting with the Docker container and so on. So that's not the hard problem here. The hard problem, and the interesting one, and the one that is good for the world, is really how do we manage the triaging and bring it to the maintainers? How quickly can this be done? And maybe like how isolatedly can this be done as well? Maybe this is not public. Maybe this is just a private dashboard, but then accessed by Alpha Omega people, and then we do a coordinated disclosure through that. Everything doesn't need to be public.
Right.
So I mean, but these are the stuff that I would like to discuss and then perhaps get some
Yeah.
I mean, and get assimilated with some of the other efforts that we are doing, and we can figure out a common
Yeah.
ground.
Yeah, I would love, so we've talked about this in like 5 or 6 different forums. I would really like to land on what the correct workflow for reporting vulnerabilities to maintainers in an automated way be. Because as soon as we can answer that question, we feel good about the answer, then we can, execute on it. Like that kind of takes away the, the longest I don't know, pole in the tent is that back and forth. So whether that's, if GitHub ever gets private issues, that would be great. If cert Vince, and maybe it's there already and we just are ignorant of it, but if cert Vince can be used for this, I mean, we could look at things like HackerOne or BugCrowd or one of those where kind of white box out a solution where they handle the last mile and we just pay them for that service. Like that works too. But I think we need to, if we don't answer that question, then Omega will be stymied by like an ever increasing response like work and less time on the core part of the business. So that's what I'm thinking. So I mentioned I have one person starting in a few weeks. I'm hoping to have another person start also in a few weeks. As we get that team, so this will probably be early December, so about a month or so from now. Let's have that conversation in earnest and start driving to a solution there. Cool. Is there anything else anyone would like to talk about? We have 3 minutes. Otherwise, you can all get a cup of coffee. Awesome. Thank you very much. I appreciate everyone's time. Have a great rest of your week. I'll see you in 2 weeks, and please join the upcoming events. Bye, everybody.